Oda. Veridi puhkaita, liakut nilia maura almoa quessin. Your Excellencies, Indigenous sisters and brothers, ladies and gentlemen, it is a true honor to be with you today in person at this Aratini festival on behalf of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. I'm really looking forward listening and watching your excellent program and performers. The United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues is a subsidiary body of the UN Economic and Social Council, and it was established already 2000 and started its work 2002. It serves as an advisory body to the ECOSOC, to the Council, with a mandate to discuss Indigenous issues relating to economic and social development, culture, the environment, education, health, and human rights. The Permanent Forum has 16 members, half appointed by Indigenous peoples and other half appointed by member states. And as you know, world is divided into 7 sociocultural regions for Indigenous peoples, and the Pacific is one of them. And I come from the northern Finland, and so I'm nominated by the Indigenous peoples from the Arctic to the Permanent Forum. And Arctic Indigenous peoples constitute both the Sámi and the Inuit. Indigenous peoples occupy only 25% of the global surface, and within that portion, Indigenous peoples manage to protect 80% of the remaining biodiversity. Indigenous peoples speak 4,000 out of 6,700 languages. And think about the amount and the significant knowledge Indigenous people carry throughout our languages. And I think the numbers, they speak for themselves. But then, on the other hand, Indigenous peoples globally have experienced of discrimination, dispossession, and disempowerment that often comes after colonization. To reclaim our rights, our lands and territories, languages and traditional knowledge and identities, self-government and autonomy is essential. And the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples recognizes the right to self-determination. And when Indigenous peoples exercising this right, they have the right to autonomy and self-government. Article 3 of the Declaration notes that by the virtue of Indigenous peoples' right to self-determination, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. And Article 4 states that Indigenous peoples, in exercising their right to self-determination, have the right to autonomy and self-government in matters relating to their internal and local affairs, as well as means for financing that autonomous function. And on behalf of the Permanent Forum, we work to implement the articles of the Declaration. And when it comes to my region, the Arctic, the Permanent Forum has highlighted, and this is important for the Pacific too, that the climate change exacerbates the difficulties already faced by Indigenous peoples, including political and economic marginalization, loss of lands and resources, human rights violations, discrimination, and unemployment. And at our last session, which was held last April, the Forum expressed and was very concerned about the alarming increasing rate of criminalization, violence, and attacks against Indigenous human rights defenders and leaders. now I will highlight some of the work what we are doing at the Permanent Forum. We are going to conduct informal virtual dialogues with indigenous peoples and member states in these 7 sociocultural regions on autonomy and self-government. And already some of these dialogues have been conducted, and we are going to conduct once in the next ones now in December and in January. And in the last session in April, we committed to facilitating informal online regional dialogues on autonomy and self-governance to support the development of guiding principles for the realization of the rights of indigenous peoples to autonomy and self-government. And we are excited to see that the Pacific and New Zealand has a work program or action. You are developing action plan for implementing the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and that you are promoting discussions and actions on this exactly specific issue that also will contribute to the work of the Permanent Forum. And as we know, indigenous people's self-government structures exist across the world in various forms, and they are often recognized by the governments. So the self-government structures you Maori people have, they are very good practice for the rest of the world, because, and the example of New Zealand would help the member states of the United Nations to build similar structures around the world, of course implemented to their specific circumstances. And for example, in Nordic countries, in Finland, we have Sámi parliaments, which are recognized by the constitution. And in our next session in the last week of April and the first week of May, we are going to discuss about the human rights and business, due diligence. And last night I had very productive discussions with your honorable foreign minister, and I heard that we can use good best practices from New Zealand to be presented at our session, to be as a model for other member states, other indigenous peoples, how to implement the relations between government and administration, business and indigenous peoples. So I look forward to continuing these discussions in April. And so that is going to be next theme. And we are also continuing our work with peace, last year's topic, peace, strong institutions, and access to justice. And in that context, we are negotiating with several states, member states, to see what the Permanent Forum could do to facilitate some advice to them in the different reconciliation processes and Truth and Reconciliation Commission works. Once again, I'd like to thank the government of New Zealand for this invitation, and I'm looking forward attending conversations, informal discussions with you during these 2 days. And I wish you a successful festival. Kia ora, kiitos. Thank you.